Hello, I'm Bob the Bookerer and welcome to my channel. Today I am doing a tag that I was tagged in about 2 months ago and then tagged in again recently, which is how I'm coming around to do it. Who said I'm not good at keeping time? So eventually, much later than planned, I'm doing it, but it now feels quite relevant because it's in Pride Month and this is a tag that is all about trans people, trans writing, trans rights, all of those sorts of things. And this is the Stand With Trans Kids book tag, the original having been created by Leo Bancroft, who is wonderful. Go and check him out. And I was also tagged by Jolene over at Bookworm Adventure Girl, who I also recommend you check out. And just before I get started on kind of going through my responses to some of these prompts, let's get tagging a couple of people who I'd also love to see sort of take this on as well. So that is, I'm going to tag the wonderful Charlie Brooke, who's just returned after a little bit of a break from BookTube, and wonderful to have her back. I'm also going to tag Renee Pierre, who is also brilliant. Go and check him out. And I'd also recommend Fraser Simons over at Springboard Thought. All three wonderful people. Please do go and check them out. But yeah, let's get started with some of these prompts. So the first prompt is all about, sorry, I'm kind of looking slightly off screen to kind of see these prompts. Tell us about some books on your TBR pile featuring a trans or non-binary character, or non-fiction about trans or non-binary stuff. So the kind of first ones that sort of have come to mind that are on my TBR, first is The Seep by Chana Porter. I don't really know all that much about it. Just I was in an LGBT bookshop in London and I asked for a recommendation. I was looking for another book and they recommended this instead. It's sort of an apocalyptic novel, but with sort of a trans woman in her 50s at the heart of the book. So really intrigued to see how the sort of apocalypse genre and a trans character writing kind of intersect in quite interesting ways. So really excited for that. And also something I'm reading as part of a book club at the moment is The Arena of the Unwell by Liam Connerman, who himself is a trans man, and this is a sort of very like grungy sort of club, like sort of sweaty club based sort of novel. And he also wrote something that I've been meaning to read for the longest time, which is a short little book as well with 404 Inklings called Transmasculine Joy in a Transphobic Culture. So this is sort of a non-fiction piece talking about his own journey of being trans, but also of sort of logging all the sort of transphobic newspaper headlines that were coming up in the UK at the time. And so then The Arena of the Unwell is sort of I suppose a companion piece in terms of being a novel where we see kind of characters just living out their lives as well. So those are kind of two that I have been, or three, including The Seep, that I've been really looking forward to reading sometime soon as well. The next prompt is recommend a favourite book, show or movie featuring a trans or non-binary character. And so I have been, I mean, I'm rubbish with TV. Normally about 4 years later, I finally watch things. But ones that spring to mind instantly are Pose, for obvious reasons, looking at the ballroom scene. There are also shows like Orange is the New Black that have characters at the heart of them that are trans, particularly the one played by Laverne Cox, which I think is so beautifully portrayed in the show, and just generally, I suppose a lot of my content, the content I consume, is LGBTQ anyhow, but I sort of have realised sort of recently that there are quite a lot of trans perspectives that I haven't necessarily always seen. So really interesting to read, for example, something like Detransition Baby, which I thought was so beautiful and so funny and brilliant. But something that I enjoyed so much about it, I think, was that at the heart of it, it was trans characters talking to each other in a way that they would when sort of non-trans people aren't around, and there's something so interesting to kind of see that as well, which I just thought was so brilliant, and I love that book so much. So the next prompt is everyone has their own journey and no one demographic is a monolith. Recommend a book with a journey, however you define that. And I mean, I feel like this is maybe a very obvious answer, not only for me, but also just in terms of the kind of title of the book, and that's A Passage North by Anouk Arikbagasam. The book in some ways doesn't really have a big sort of plot to hang a lot on. A lot of it's about an inner journey whilst he travels through the country of Sri Lanka to go and see family. And so I found that really profound, that kind of idea of this sort of interior life of his character. I also, on a similar note, really love the books of Penelope Fitzgerald for that reason. They're so interior and they're so focused on the inner lives of some of their characters that there is a real progression throughout throughout her characters' books that do that as well. So I think that would probably be it. And for the next prompt, is sort of about a book that has taught us something. So none of us knows everything, even about our own identities, especially since we're not a monolith and each have our own journey. What is a book that taught you something either about yourself or the world around you? And for this, I mean, I think a book that really profoundly changed how well, a couple of books that really profoundly changed how I thought about a few things. And they do as well, in some ways, I guess, largely focus on my identity as a gay man. But the first, I would probably say, well, it's kind of a pair of two. So Randy Shilts and the band Played On, and David France with How to Survive a Plague, both of which go into a lot of detail around the HIV and AIDS crisis, and particularly the kind of the human aspect of that. So what was happening sort of scientifically and politically, but also what was happening on the ground with people. And that's something that I found incredibly profound and powerful. And similarly, Matthew Todd's Straitjacket, which is a book that looks a lot at queer shame. And I found it really moving as well. And it also taught me quite a lot about myself, but also taught me quite a lot about how things sort of have threaded together, I guess, for the LGBT community, particularly in the UK, but elsewhere as well. Both sort of sets of books really profound for me personally, but also I think have quite a lot to say more widely. And on one sort of more outside of myself, I'd probably have to say Laura Bates with Men Who Hate Women, I believe it's called. And that was a book that is really quite difficult to read because it's a bit of a gut punch constantly, but it talks a lot about online communities of predominantly men who target women in quite sexist and horrific ways. And that book really charts the sort of history of some of that growth, particularly again in the UK, but also in the US, and what that means for women and women's safety more generally as well. So really tough read, but really, really important and really powerful, I think. The next prompt is when things are hard in the world or in our lives, sometimes there are things we can do to help center and refocus ourselves, to bring joy, to keep us going, to keep living, resisting, being our best, authentically amazing selves. What are some things you do to center yourself or find joy? It may come as no surprise that reading is often quite a big and powerful thing in my life, just for sort of finding a bit of peace, finding a bit of solitude. I am someone who likes quite a bit of time to sort of be by myself and sort of do things by my own rhythms, and reading is obviously very good for that. It seems it's going to be fairly basic in some ways, or sort of predictable to say things like like music and going for walks in nature, but I think those are genuinely restorative things. I think I also am a bit of I suppose a planner at times as well, so sometimes my way of recentering is to just kind of get things written down. My creative writing is a big part of that as well, but I do not give myself enough time to do that, so my novel will basically never be finished, the one I'm writing at the moment at least. But yeah, and similar to this, what's your walk on music? What's the music that helps you feel at home in your body or helps sort of G you up? I remember at one point going sort of starting my first day in a new job at the same place I was working anyway, but just sort of switching roles, and I walked in listening to Anastasia sort of singing like power ballads to sort of like get myself like ready on that first day. And it's kind of a weird energy to walk into a room with, because it's sort of a bit like, yeah, you jilted me, you ex-lover who I hate now, look at me, I'm living my best life. And I'm like, I'm just going to work. This is not like, I'm not having to try and like slay a dragon as I'm walking in. I'm just going to go in and log in and do some emails. So it was a bit of an odd energy for that, but I think generally it will be sort of things that are quite pensive and quite soothing. For me at the moment, the music that's really, I mean, I'm finding it quite difficult in some ways because it's quite a profound song, but Hideous by Oliver Sim at the moment, formerly from the XX, is a song that is like blowing my mind, and is sort of just like helps me feel really grounded in quite a lot of things, whilst also wanting to cry. So I'm not quite sure what that says about what my state of groundedness is, but there we go. And one of the other prompts here is about mentors or people of wisdom, or heroes who I look up to. And one that has always sort of stuck with me, at least for the last few years, sort of since I sort of came across him, has been Derek Jarman, and I've got a couple of books here that I'm planning on reading soon. Derek Jarman was an artist, writer, diarist, gardener, and activist, and sort of a large part of his life was really shaped by not only his HIV status, but also the fact that because of that and because of his sort of quite outrageous artistic style, he was often sort of a bit of a social pariah. He was sort of, you know, around quite a lot in the 70s and 80s, which particularly was quite a harsh time to not only be an LGBT person in the UK, but also, you know, he was so sort of against the grain that I think he ruffled quite a few feathers, and you know, he suffered quite a lot personally because of that as well. But I just think a really fascinating man, sort of so principled. And I went to go and visit his sort of cottage, his Prospect House, Prospect Cottage rather, in Dungeness, and it was sort of almost a sort of religious experience for me of sort of going and visiting this house that meant so much to me, and I kind of got really quite emotional there as well. And I bought a giant print, which at some point I do need to put up on the wall behind me here of that cottage as well. But yeah, Derek Jarman is sort of yeah, like, you know, someone who means quite a lot to me, and I think his whole approach of sort of, you know, being quite happy to be sort of outcasted and sort of fight for what he believes in is sort of something that empowers me, I think, quite a lot in my day-to-day life. Prompt 9 is, who are some out trans non-binary booktubers, Instagrammers, actors, authors, etc., who you would like to shout out? There are a few people I know, but I'm not quite sure how out they are, so I'm not going to go down that line. But I'll maybe stick with authors, because I know that one's I'm a bit more comfortable with that. First being K Tempest, who came out as non-binary, I think last year or the year before. Their writing is just so impactful. They make music as well. I just find them this sort of restlessly creative person, and I'm really fascinated by their thinking process. Their book, their novel, the Bricks the House Built, no, The Bricks That Built the House, whatever that title is. I just thought it was such a brilliant book that sort of managed to merge together a sort of local dialect of sort of South London, and sort of sounds like people I know, but also is just sort of has this really dynamic style, and I just really, really loved it. Also, there is Peter Scalpello, and their collection Limbic, which I think I mentioned on sort of a previous thing, but like I'd bought a signed copy already directly from the press, and then I saw them at a poetry thing, and they signed it again for me, so double signed. But yeah, Limbic is such a beautiful collection of just very sort of tender and brutal and so many other bits in this collection. It's just gorgeous. I love it. It's great. And I also want to say Rivers Solomon. I believe that they do use they them pronouns, and I think they do use some other neo pronouns as well, but I'm not entirely sure on those. But Sorrowland, I just thought was such a beautiful book, and was the sort of sci-fi, apocalyptic, grisly kind of book, but just so interesting. So yeah, really, really liked that as well. And last but not least, what are some organisations you'd like to shout out supporting trans kids or trans folks? So there is Gendered Intelligence in the UK that does a lot of really great work with young people, and sort of particularly in helping people find their identity, speak about it, have the language for it, and meet other people sort of like them. Similarly for Mermaids, and also sort of across the LGBT community more generally, LGBT Switchboard, which does is sort of a phone service open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Every day to listen to people talking about their identities, who they are, various questions they might have about pretty much anything, as well. So really important. I've tagged some people already, but I just think this is such a beautiful tag, and thank you again to Leo for, I really recommend checking out Leo's original video on this anyway, just because it's brilliant, but I think just Leo's just heart and openness as a wonderful, wonderful person who we're very lucky to have in this world and on BookTube is great as well. So please go give Leo some love, and that's been me rambling about some books and stuff. I've been Bob, take care and speak to you all soon. Bye bye.